Welcome back into the Draft Geeks podcast. Today, we got another position ranking for you. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, we're going to move on from receivers. We're going to stay with pass catchers, but go to the tight end position. There's obviously some top end talent at this position, but we are only going to do our top 8 for this. We will probably talk about maybe a couple other ones, but only the top 8. So we hope you guys are ready because the Draft Geeks podcast starts right now.
Welcome into another positional rankings episode of the Draft Geeks podcast. I'm Max Shostak over at the Draft Geek, here alongside Jace Campbell over at Pat's Drive. There's a lot of hype around the top end of this tight end class, and we're going to give you a preview of some of that, as well as some of the depth in this class. So I'm excited to get into this one. Maybe it's a class that some people aren't talking as much about, but that's what we're here for. We'll go over our top 8 guys, and then maybe a couple more.
Yeah, for sure has the top end talent. I mean, it's no Brock Bowers coming out of this class. There's someone who is probably pretty close. I mean, had a great season and someone that will be a top 15 pick in both of our minds. So there's still talent in this tight end class. And honestly, tight ends are one of the harder positions to evaluate. There's guys constantly coming out of the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds that are everyday impact players for NFL teams. There's different type of tight ends, run blocking guys, inline guys. There's split out wide guys, more pass catching like we've seen Travis Kelce do. So it's going to be a fun episode to talk about these guys, look at how we view them, and see who the top 8 tight ends are in the 2025 draft class. So excited to get going.
All right, let's do it. Do you how many honorable mentions do you want to shout out before we've got our lists up here? So if you're audio only, we have our lists over on YouTube. If you want to head over there, hit the subscribe button. If you're on YouTube and haven't hit the subscribe button, we'd appreciate it if you did that. Do you want to do two honorable mentions? 3
Yeah,
if you got 3?
I'll throw 2 out there, and I'm going to be quick on them just because
Yeah.
I told you I thought that it was pretty hard to put in number 8 anyways. Like I didn't think there was anyone that separated themselves from being in my top 8 for me to even put who my number 8 guy is. But 2 guys that I think I like to talk about. I think Caden Prescorn's a little bit of an older prospect. He's going to be 26 years old, so that's why he's not in my top 8. But you look at the Ole Miss offense, how they used him. He was used differently than more of the other guys. You know, like Jackson Hawes is more of an inline guy. Same with Luke Leachy. Those guys are more inline guys. But it's the Ole Miss offense. It's going to be that discussion too, right? How friendly is it? He's not the most athletic guy. He doesn't run the best routes, but he did have a little bit production. He's been a 3-year guy for them. He was at Memphis too. So him and Jackson Dart had kind of that chemistry. It's just the older prospect for me, the lack of athleticism, and I really don't see him being good enough in the run game to translate into the NFL. But he was one guy that I thought was intriguing on a good team, on a good offense. But it's probably going to end up being the same Trey Harris debate as, hey, how does he translate into an NFL style offense?
Yeah, I had Prescorn as my tight end, number 10. And it's kind of interesting because as you mentioned, doesn't have that high end athleticism and kind of does the dirty work, like short yardage routes, but isn't as good of a blocker as somebody that as what you would expect for somebody that has that sort of route profile. So kind of an interesting prospect, tight end 3 in an NFL offense in my mind. And then one other guy I wanted to shout out is Jake Brenningstool, the tight end out of Clemson, who's kind of an above the rim guy, but I didn't think he was, a good enough blocker. I think he is not an inline tight end. I think he profiles more of as a slot guy. So it'll be interesting to see how he's used, scheme specific probably, but somebody else I wanted to shout out.
Yeah, for sure. You might have the conversation, is he a receiver? But he's also 240 pounds. And so it's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if he could maybe lose some weight, he's probably not fluid enough to consistently be a receiver. You could do some red zone things with him, but he's kind of a tweener for me. Like, I didn't know where to put him. Obviously, I don't think he wouldn't have made the top 10 receiver list. He wasn't going to make the top 8 tight end list, but it's like, I don't know if he's either of these guys. So he's kind of like a hybrid at the NFL level. So
same as Aronde Gadsden out of Syracuse is just straight up plays receiver, but out of the tight end spot. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But those were really the only guys for me. I mean, you could talk about What is it? Benjamin Yorsek. I don't want to butcher his name, but it's just like
Jurasic, I think.
Jurasic.
Georgia.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. For me, it's like he's more of a move tight end. He didn't do much in college. You probably have to put some weight on him. So maybe there's something there. But yeah, you could talk about all these guys, but there's just a lot of questions on a lot of them. And so that I'm
Yeah.
glad we didn't do a top 10, honestly, at this position, because it would have just been the 8, 9, and 10 probably would have been a bunch of the same conversations we're having. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't really know about them. But yeah, so we can jump right into the top 8 now.
Who do you want to start with? So for those of you that can see, we have the same 7 and 8, not the same guys at the same spots, but I have Terrence Ferguson at 8, Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame at 7, and Jace has those guys inverted. Do you want to start with T Ferg?
Yeah, let's start with him.
All right, so Terrence Ferguson's the tight end out of Oregon, had a really good combine in a pretty lackluster tight end group in terms of the guys that tested. He's an adequate athlete. I actually think he's a decent separator. He's got long strides and eats up yak. I think he brings power to his blocking reps, but isn't that good of a blocker. But I look for the trait where it's like, okay, he's at least bringing his all into these reps. And he is a mauler at the second level. So when you get a mismatch where he's going to go block a DB on perhaps like a downfield block, that is his specialty right there. I think he can play in line, probably going to do a little bit more slot H-back stuff as well. So perhaps a versatile weapon in an offense. And I think he's got a good frame that will allow him to at least have the opportunity to excel at the NFL level. I think he's a good safety valve with long strides to potentially hit a big play, and a tight end 2, tight end 3 weapon, depending on how good of a tight end room he's entering.
Yeah, I mean, 6'5" and 3/8. He ran a 4.63 40, which obviously was the fastest at the tight end group there. He also jumped 39 inches on the vert. I agree with you. He has really great size, good length. His athleticism is sneaky underrated, in my opinion. He is
Yeah.
a yard after the catch threat. I really liked how they used him in that RPO system. A lot of slide routes, a lot of stuff like that. He averaged straight up 9 yards per catch after the reception, which was tied for fifth amongst tight ends. Like, I think that he has that ability, if you get it to him in open space, to create with the ball in his hands. He wins off the line of scrimmage. He's super explosive, whether he's in the slot, in the inline tight end. He can win with his first step. Who's ever guarding him. His catch radius is massive. He makes catches away from his body consistently, which you like to see from a bigger, whether it's a receiver or, big tight ends. You want to see them be able to catch it away with their arms extended, so that contact through their body or whatever can't affect them. I think he needs to add a little bit more weight. I do agree with you. He is a willing run blocker, which you look at that and you say, okay, he's willing. He's putting his hat in there. He's going to be able to, at least have a competitive run blocking rep in the NFL. I think he needs to add probably just a little bit more weight. I don't want it to affect his athleticism though, so that's kind of like a give or take there. He rounds routes a little bit down the field, not truly established like some of the top guys, which we'll get into. This was an interesting one. For 6'5", he only had a 25% contested catch rate. I was a
Right.
little bit
Yeah.
concerned about that, and it was I just didn't see him attacking the ball in the air. He was a little complacent, waiting for the ball to get to him. It's like, no, with your frame, go up and get it, go up and catch it outside of your frame with your hands. And so for a bigger tight end, a bigger target down the field in the red zone, I didn't see that, and I would like to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I agree with those similar sentiments, right? He shows off the catch radius when it's kind of an uncontested play, but sometimes when it gets contested, I think he reacts a little bit differently. So we'll jump to Mitchell Evans, my tight end 7, your tight end 8 out of Notre Dame, right around that 6'5", 260 mark. So a little bit of a bigger guy. I actually had Evans a little bit of a tier above Ferguson and then the guys we touched on in the honorable mentions. And he's not, some special athlete, but I think he does a lot of what you want to see out of a tight end 2 prospect. I think he's comfortable with most of the route tree, especially those in-breaking routes. So like quick hitters on slants and stuff like that. He's got steady hands. I think he's good in congested areas, adequate burst out of breaks. Again, nothing special, but this is a tight end group, not a wide receiver group. I think he's very strong, good blocker, and I think he has inline ability at the NFL level. His mediocre speed, I think, probably puts a cap on his ceiling. But again, you're drafting a tight end 2 here. I think if he remains healthy, because he struggled with some injuries, he can carve out a legitimate tight end 2 role for himself.
Yeah, I mean, 2 straight seasons with injuries. He had an ACL injury and a broken foot, so he missed a good amount of his sophomore and junior season. Um, but he still ran a 4.74 at the combine. Like, I don't want to say he's obviously not as athletic as Terrence Ferguson or some of these guys that we'll talk about, but a little bit more of a sneaky guy. But I agree with his weight, with his size, him being at 260 almost. He was the same height as Terrence Ferguson. He's more of an inline guy for me, 12 personnel type tight end that's going to come in, do the hard stuff, short yardage goal line, and then he's able to leak out, have a couple designed play action passes that you can throw to him. I love his hands, very big and strong hands. You see him catch it, big paws, where he just, kind of eats up the ball with his hands and stuff right there. So I like him. Obviously played on a good Notre Dame team this year that made a deep run. So it was fun to watch him against some of those bigger ones, but the athletic profile doesn't really allow him for yards after the catch. He's going to be limited there. And he's going to be limited on the routes that you can run with him. Like you said, scheme up his target type of things. Hey, we're going to run. And then, on 3rd and 1, if we're going to try to leak him out or whatever, we can try to throw a flat to him, to get a yard, or in the red zone, you can try to leak him out on a play action pass. So a little bit more schemed up targets than I see with some of these guys, but still nonetheless, because of his run blocking ability, because of his size, his inline potential, I think that he, like you said, is a good tight end 2 option for a lot of teams, and they'll want to pair him up with one of the more heavy pass catching tight ends that are already in the NFL and be able to build packages around him.
I think he's a really safe, higher floor tight end 2
Agreed.
prospect, but you're not getting that, tight end 1 potential out of him. So if you need the tight end 2 on day 3, I think this is the guy. And then, the 6 other guys I think have closer to something you could say a tight end 1 potential, but
Yeah.
a couple of them come with caveats. Should we start with one of those guys, my 5, your 6, or should we go with my 6, your 5?
We'll go with your 5, my 6.
All right, so that's going to be Harold Fannin Jr., a little bit of a controversial prospect in this class, the tight end out of Bowling Green. So as Jace mentioned, he's my tight end 5. He's Jace's tight end 6. And he's a much smaller, slimmer tight end prospect, but I don't exactly think that he is the athlete that you would expect for somebody of that stature. So like you hear that stature, you think maybe Isaiah Likely, who's an excellent athlete, can move like a wide receiver down the field, high points the football like that. And you're not getting that exact same stuff out of Fannin. He had a record-breaking season as just a 20-year-old. So this is a very young prospect. You hear Bowling Green and you're like, oh, maybe 6-year senior. No, this guy, year 1, year 2, year 3, he's out of there. So this is a younger player. He's a dangerous threat up the seams. That's where I really like him. He'll play anywhere, I think, from H-back to wide receiver at the NFL level. And I think he's willing to get after it as a blocker. He's not that good of a blocker, but, he's willing to put his hat in the ring and just give it his all. I think he's truly willing to do that. Sometimes it doesn't have the success rate that you would hope for. And then as I touched on at the top, I think you want a more fluid, twitchy athlete if you're getting a tight end with this frame. He brings a lot of creativity to the offense, but I just think he fits a limited amount of teams. So if this guy falls with the amount of receiving yards he had last year, he's got 2,400 career receiving yards in 3 years, which is incredibly impressive. But if this guy falls, I wouldn't be so surprised because I think there are truly a limited amount of number of teams that can use him because he does not fit every scheme.
No, he's going to be very scheme dependent, and that's why I have him as my tight end 6. The smaller frame at 6'3" and quarter, 241. He didn't run. I mean, 4.71's a good 40 time, but for the wrap that Harold Fannin has in his size, you were probably looking in the 4.6s. Like, why did he run that? I know he's like right there. But no, 1,555 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. He forced 34 missed tackles, which was the most. He had 12.
That's one season right there.
That's one season right there. That's not like, junior or, sophomore and junior, whatever. No, that's one season right there for Harold Fannin. It was literally record breaking, like you said. But I agree with you. The first thing I wrote is he's a great vertical threat up the seams, just like you mentioned. I think he has good hand-eye coordination. He's able to track the ball. He's good with the ball in his hands. Obviously, the 34 missed tackles. Route runner, he has good suddenness. I think you hit it on the head. He's an able run blocker. I would not trust him to be a consistent one. You're not putting him in line. You're not making him cut out the C gap or D gap. Like, I would not trust him to do that consistently at the NFL level. I think you could, but this guy's got to be schemed up. He's got to have targets. He's got to be in an offense that's going to allow for him to be out on air and do some creative things with shifts and motions and get him in advantageous situations. His height and weight is the biggest thing that scares me. I don't know if NFL teams are going to want to take a chance on him right there. Obviously, they're looking at, hey, the Chiefs with Travis Kelce, they've done that and they've been able to find the thing. But Travis Kelce also at least can play inline tight end. I don't want to say he's a great blocker because I don't think he is, but they have a role for him in the inline scheme. You always see him there just running 5-yard spot routes, and not that Harold Fanning can't, but it's just you got to find that offensive coordinator that can do it. I think his lower body strength needs to get better. If he wants to be an improved inline guy, I think that's how he gets there. Is he's got to get a little bit stronger in the legs. The competition level is obviously going to be a knock, but he did go against Penn State and some of those teams last year at Bowling Green. So we'll see there. And then he just lacks great explosion. Like you mentioned, the athlete was not there on film. I did not see the athlete I was expecting to see. In and out of breaks, it's not like he pops out of them, he jumps out of them. And that kind of showed in his testing. The explosion aspects just weren't there. So I like Harold Fannin. I do think he will be a very good tight end if you can get him in the right scheme. Same thing we talked about with receivers. But I just wonder how many schemes are in the NFL that fit this guy's mold.
Yeah, he's a tough eval because I think some NFL teams may have him as tight end 10. Like, simply, we cannot work with him in our offense. And then some teams might have him as tight end 3 because maybe that's exactly what they're looking for. So for the invisible team that Jace and I are making tight end boards for, it's a little bit of a tough placement here. So we'll pivot to our next guy. It's going to be Gunnar Helm out of Texas. My tight end 6, Jace's tight end 5. We're kind of alternating all the way down the board here. We don't agree on anything, but we almost agree on everything. And then we'll get to 2 and 1 later on. But Gunnar Helm is a tight end out of Texas, a little bit of a bigger player. So kind of that Mitchell Evans frame. He brings, good size, and I think he's got traditional alignments out of the tight end position. So, think your dad's favorite tight end. He probably lines up like he does. He's not going to wow you with speed, but I think he's got enough to get downfield and make the most of those yak opportunities. As a blocker, I think he's a work in progress, but he's got the play strength and the size to be a good one. I think that's going to get coached into him, so I have some more confidence in him in that aspect. And I think if he can improve his ability to stay engaged through the blocks and, do what I also just touched on, I think he could be a good one in the NFL. He's a tight end too. But I think he's got the size, the aggression to potentially be a tight end 1 down the road if he's developed properly. I'm comfortable taking Gunnar Helm at the end of day 2, knowing that I'm getting an experienced, gritty player that's just going to, put his head down, do the dirty work, but also gives you a little bit more capability out of the tight end spot than you would get from a normal dirty work tight end.
I almost full dove into the meme we talked about and put him as my number 4 guy. I was way higher. I was way higher on Gunnar Helm than I thought I was going to be coming out. Like you mentioned, the frame, 6'5". He has the NFL frame, 241 pounds. I think you talk about he's a good inline run blocker. I do still think he needs to play with lower pad level to consistently be there. He does have a little bit of a tendency to get wide hands in the run game. He has generated some penalties. But talking just about athletically and stuff, he ran a 4.85, so he's not going to wow you vertically. A 38-inch vert. He wasn't super explosive, but I thought he was a really slippery route runner. He consistently made guys miss. He had a couple hurdles in the season where they're like, he gets up and you're like, holy crap, this dude actually has the ability, in my opinion, to be a very good run after the catch guy. I thought he was good with his routes, in and out of breaks, where, he's at least, making it, he has good salesmanship on his routes. And so I was higher on this guy than I thought I was. I originally had him below Harold Fannin, but after watching his film, seeing the season he put up with Texas, 786 yards, 7 touchdowns, he forced 12 missed tackles. And then with the combination of him being able to play inline tight end right away, I think, and then him having what I thought was really good ball skills, really good length, the ideal NFL size, and then I see the ability for him to be a very good route runner and yards after the catch guy. That's why I have him as my number 5 guy, because I see the potential. I like I said, I wanted to put him. I didn't want to, but I thought about putting him at 4. I thought about jumping him up there and seeing if he would be the above Mason Taylor. I just couldn't do it. Mason Taylor I really like, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I was actually really high on Gunnar Helm after watching his film.
You see the vision with Gunnar Helm.
I do.
I think it's really tough to rank Gunnar Helm versus a guy like Harold Fannin, because I try not to knock Harold Fannin too much, because like I mentioned, we don't run teams. So we're making our tight end board out of, kind of what we like out of offense, because some tight ends truly do only fit into a certain amount of schemes.
Yeah.
But I think Harold Fannin's going to go to an advantageous scheme, right? I think it'd be irresponsible for a team that he doesn't fit with to draft him and be like, cool, we had you as our next tight end on the board.
Yeah.
So that's not how that's going to work. But then Gunnar Helm, I think also he's a step above. Like I mentioned, I have Mitchell Evans a tier above Terrence Ferguson and the honorable mention guys. And then Gunnar Helm is in another tier. And that starts kind of that tier of the guys that I have from 6 to 4. Maybe your range is a little bit different, but that's kind of the picture of this tight end class. You touched on Mason Taylor. We'll go there next. Mason Taylor, the tight end out of LSU. He's my tight end 3. He's Jace's tight end 4. I like Mason Taylor in a little bit of a league of his own here. I don't think he's a part of the top 2 guys, but he was comfortably ahead of 4 and the rest for me. Mason Taylor's got that right around that 6'5", 255 build. A younger prospect. His dad is Hall of Famer Jason Taylor, which is going to get worn out all through April, but that's the beauty of having a legacy NFL player. I actually started my little blurb with mentioning that, but I think Mason Taylor, aside from, having good genetics, is a guy that's got a natural release, really natural release, like wide receiver, like from inline and slot alignments. I think he uses his quickness, and he's really smart. I think he's got tactical movements as a receiver to kind of create separation. He knows that he's a tight end, and maybe he's not going to beat this safety, but his head fakes, or he gets a little shoulder lean and then he breaks out or in. I think he's really smart. Those tactical movements really help him set up defenders and create separation. He's a good yak option. I think he's got sure hands and solid change of direction at the tight end position. He's got the functional strength to develop into a better blocker. He's still a little bit of a work in progress there, as I mentioned with Gunnar Helm. So some coaching in that aspect, but you come to the NFL, you get coaching. So he's in the right spot. I think he's a natural athlete. He's got good feel for finding space. And I think perhaps the most underrated tight end in this group. If a team needs a tight end and they swing and miss on Colston, Loveland, or Tyler Warren, and by swing and miss, I mean they just can't land them. They go early. Mason Taylor, I think, is a great option in round 2. Not on day 2, in round 2. I think Mason Taylor's a top 50 guy comfortably in this class for me. And I was a big fan of his tape. I was not expecting to have, a guy that would be a sufficient backup option to missing out on the top 2 guys. But that's what I think Mason Taylor is. I think he's got legit tight end 1 potential.
No, I can definitely see tight end 1 potential because of how well-rounded of a player he is. Just a very good prospect playing at LSU in the SEC. He only had 1 drop this season. Very good hands, like we've talked about before. I did like one thing you said. You talked about his nuances in his route. He's not going to outrun safeties. I said he's physical at the top of his routes to create separation. He knows how to lean into leverage. He knows how to snap it off and use his body to create separation, or, kind of get the other guy off of him. So I really do like that. High IQ player, finds a soft spot. He works back to quarterbacks consistently, makes it easier for them. I thought he was a great mover in space. Like you mentioned, yard after the catch guy. He looks like he's very fluid. I like him as kind of like an H-back type guy. You can put him down in line, but I think he's going to be best there. Slide routes, screens, stuff like that. Obviously over routes. I really do like him. I didn't think he had the most defined route tree. I'm not going to knock his route running and stuff. I just didn't think he ran all of the routes at a high level, which obviously he's a tight end, so you don't expect that. But just one thing there. Also, he was in the 29th percentile against single coverage over the last 2 years. I worry about that because of the athleticism and stuff. If you're getting a little bit better, more athletic safeties, and there are some bigger safeties in the league, what is that going to look like for him creating separation against single coverage. And I do think he needs to add a little bit more strength, but the NFL pedigree thing, like you said, is going to get nailed into our heads and everyone's heads.
Yeah.
He has it. And I don't think that that's the make or break thing in the NFL, but I do think that it does kind of put him at a step ahead. Obviously his uncle too was Zach Taylor. So they have, his brother and, or Zach Thomas, sorry. No, Taylor, right? Zach Taylor, or was it?
Is the Bengals coach?
No. The Dolphins linebacker.
Okay.
That's who I thought it was. Maybe I'm tripping. I know he has an uncle that plays in the NFL. I gotta look this up now because this is really gonna piss me off.
And
who is it?
While you look that up, or just let me know when you get it. But I just think Mason Taylor, if I have to keep bringing stuff back to South Carolina games, you can stop me. But they played against South Carolina, and you mentioned the bigger safety aspect. And when he went up against a guy like Nicky Manwari, I watched LSU kind of move him around. So, try to get him away from those matchups. And it works. Like, you can't knock him for having to be moved away from, one of the top safety prospects. But I think, as you mentioned, the single coverage stuff, I think he's got to find some of those advantageous matchups a little bit early on in his career. And then, maybe develops in that aspect. But I think he clearly sat in on some of those LSU wide receiver meetings because
it was Zach Thomas, the Dolphins linebacker. So I don't know the relation.
I was
there.
like, Zach Taylor is somebody else.
Yeah, no. And when I said it, I was like Zach Thomas, but I'm like, wait, his name's Taylor. But then, yeah. So, and again, like I said, it's not the end all be all, but I do think that, obviously growing up in an NFL household with your dad and then your uncle there and stuff, you've been in NFL locker rooms, how the game's played, the work ethic, stuff like that. You've been pushed, motivated by a guy who's done it at the highest level, and at a really good they were great NFL players, both of them. So yeah, that's something that will get put into our brains a ton. And you'll hear it a bunch with Mason Taylor, but I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing because it just shows that, I do think he will come in and be ready to play in the NFL. I don't think he's a development guy. I don't think you need to say, oh, what's his scheme fit? No, this guy, in my opinion, will come in and be ready to go in an NFL system.
20 years old, right?
Yeah, he's young.
Yeah, I'm in on Mason Taylor. In terms of how in you could be on a round 2 tight end prospect, Mason Taylor would have been my tight end 2 last year. So, obviously behind Brock Bowers, but then you bring in the guys that we had last year. What was it? Ben Sinnott, Eric All, Jatavian Sanders, Tanner McLaughlin, list goes on and on. Mason Taylor would have been my tight end 2. Maybe the Bengals will draft him and put him in the same tight end room as Eric All and Tanner McLaughlin. So we'll just have a bunch of young tight ends that never get to play because they felt the need to lock up Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, seriously.
Maybe we'll do a whole episode on Bengals cap spending.
Yeah, the Bengals, who they need to draft and stuff because they just signed.
They don't draft well.
They're paying 4 guys. They're paying 4 guys half their salary cap, so they better have some young studs on rookie contracts.
Unbelievable. Well, if they need another tight end that profiles similarly to Mike Gesicki, I think that takes us into my tight end 4, your tight end 3 pretty well. Elijah Arroyo, the tight end out of Miami, somebody that I would comp a little more towards Jonnu Smith than Mike Gesicki, but similar in terms of usage, right? You're getting a slot guy. This is not a tight end that I'm like, yeah, line up in line and, go after it. I think Arroyo and Fannin are a little similar in terms of usage, but I'm a little bit more comfortable with Arroyo as a slot receiver and with his ability to succeed there and then come in line for a couple snaps, but that's not where he's going to do the most of his work. But the main thing about Elijah Arroyo is his speed, right? This guy can fly. And, whatever the 40 number is, whatever it is, I don't really even pay attention to the 40 number for tight ends that much because I think the tape speed is just so much more important. He's got to play against Georgia Tech where that's his 40 in my mind. He just absolutely rips down the field and scores a touchdown early in that Georgia Tech game that they lost. But he showcases what he can do with his speed. He broke out in 2024. He was finally healthy, and Cam Ward certainly helps. He was able to showcase his ability after the catch. He's got natural route running, ability to stretch the field. I think he brings good athleticism, and he's got good contact balance, good balance when he gets rerouted. But he's going to do, like I said, a majority of the work from the slot. So his lighter frame and I think his subpar hand placement as a blocker limits him there, and his lack of power as a help blocker. I wanted to see that a little bit better because I'm like, all right, maybe you're not the main blocker, but I want him to still, get involved if he can be a help blocker. But I think he can be coached up a little bit in that aspect. He's a slightly scheme-specific player, but I think his potentially elite receiving upside definitely puts him higher on more teams' boards than a guy like Fannin, who I think is more scheme-specific than Arroyo.
Yeah, and the reason Arroyo is higher for me than Fannin is the size alone. 6'5" in the eighth, 250 pounds. His wingspan is almost 82 inches. It's 81 and 7/8.
That's
He has,
O-line like.
yeah, he has massive arms. Like his ability to go up, and we talked about it with some of these other guys, to go up and catch the ball away from their body and stuff.
Yeah.
But how long he is, how much he can, overextend so a guy can't even get into his hands when he's trying to make a catch. He has that elite length for a tight end. He also had 8.9 yards after the catch per reception. So Harold Fannin, I believe, is no, who was it that had 9? Now I'm trying to think of who it was. Oh, Terrence Ferguson had 9, right? So Elijah Arroyo was right behind him at 8.9 yards after the catch. He had the 4th most deep yards. I just think that his size, his length, he's ready to be an NFL target, massive down the field. The way he can get out of, his stance and threaten a defense vertically almost instantaneously, whether it's a linebacker or a safety who's ever having to guard him over the top coverage underneath coverage. He makes it so hard for defenses to cover the seam in the middle of the field. I think that he has really good stems at the top of his routes. He creates separation coming in and out of them. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to be an inline guy, but he actually smacks some dudes when he's running like fly motions and tries to run split zones.
Yeah.
He's just throwing his body in there now. It's not great.
It's a little reckless, but it is reckless sometimes. Yeah.
He is just throwing his body in there. He's a physical dude. Some people will argue he has this untapped potential just because he hasn't played very much in college. He has dealt with injuries, which is a little concerning. It's been multiple knee injuries to his left knee. That's why he didn't test, I believe, at the combine, is because he had a knee bruise on the knee that he's already torn his ACL. He has said everything's going to be okay. It was more just precautionary, but that's a little bit of a concern. I do think that he's a little bit stiff and rigid because of his injuries. He has the ability to make people miss, but I don't think he's elite at it. I just see a little bit stiff rigidness, but the way that this dude can stretch the field from the slot, from wherever you're putting him, I think you got to put him high on the NFL list because teams want that. Teams want a tight end that can vertically put pressure on a defense, whatever coverage they're in, whoever's trying to guard him. It's so quick, and you can do so many things when you have a tight end that can just run the seam and run the alley like he can. So I like Elijah Arroyo. His size puts him above some of these other guys for me. I just don't think that his arm length and stuff, at worst case scenario, you're throwing jump balls to this guy because he's so freaking massive in the red zone. But you're obviously not going to do that just because he has the length and stuff. He obviously has the speed. He has the ability to stretch the field. And so that's why I have him as a top 3 tight end in this class.
No, listen, I don't agree with him being top 3 because I like Taylor better, but he's 4 for me. So he's right there. Yeah. You mentioned the knee injuries. It's a little bit scary. But he was healthy, and you saw what he was when he was healthy. So he's got the ability to be a pretty impressive player.
And we didn't mention this, but he was really good at the Senior Bowl, like really good.
Oh yeah, he was one of the biggest winners of the Senior Bowl, if not the biggest winner. He was a very, very impressive player, which in a tight end class that isn't super, talented outside of the top 2, top 3, that's big news. Because it shows somebody is out there that's winning against competition, and is able to compete in a scenario like they have at the Senior Bowl. Time to adjust your eyes. Tight end 2 and tight end 1 are a little bit different than the rest of these guys. We'll start it off with our first agreement on this list at tight end 2, Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan, who I'm curious to ask you, because on my big board, it's easy for me. I know who my tight end 1 is comfortably versus tight end 2. But on my big board, they're not far apart. Is Colston Loveland a top 15 player for you?
He's not. As of right now, he's not.
So he is for me. So maybe I'm a little bit higher on him, but he's a 21-year-old prospect out of Michigan. He's a super athletic mover. I think he's got great body control and hands to make his catches off his frame, and obviously catches the ball on frame, only 2 drops this year. He's got good burst as, both a route runner and in yards after the catch situations, which is a big thing that I look for. Can you, 1, burst off the line, but then 2, burst after the catch to create more yards? He checks both of those boxes. I think he's got strong base as a blocker and will be able to hold his own in some capacity as a blocker in the NFL, but I think he's best suited to go to a team where he can be the number 1 receiving tight end option, and they have a very good blocking tight end option. I think that's his best fit. So, however a team wants to align him, have him fit in, I think they'll adjust accordingly. But I don't think Colston Loveland can be your best tight end as a blocker. He had a dramatic dip in quarterback play from this year, or from last year to this year. Obviously, losing JJ McCarthy is a big deal. But that 2024 tape remained impressive. I think he's one of the 2 round 1 prospects at this tight end group.
No, I mean, it's not even close between 2 and 3. And I mean, quite frankly, I don't know if it's close between 1 and 2 either for me. But Colston Loveland is a totally different player than Tyler Warren, right? Like, we'll talk about Tyler Warren. Colston Loveland he is big. He's 6'5", not 5 foot. That'd be really bad. He's 6'5" and 6'8". So 3/4, 250 pounds. He had a 90.6 receiving grade on PFF, and he runs routes like you would think a 6'1" receiver would. He's super loose in the hips. He creates so much separation. He has some nasty ability to put his foot in the ground and, change direction really effectively. I think he's too big for safeties. He's too fast for linebackers. How the heck do you guard him? I don't know how defenses figure it out, because it's going to be very hard to figure it out. And I don't think a lot of teams in college were able to figure out how to guard Colston Loveland.
His best defender was Davis Warren last year.
Yeah. I mean, that's okay. Moving on.
Yeah.
But great on air in the slot, like you mentioned. If you put this guy consistently at the line, I don't think you're playing this guy in 12 personnel packages. If you have a run blocking tight end behind him, you're putting him in, and you're putting the tight end, the other one, as the run blocker. You're maybe having Colston Loveland as the wing. I didn't think he was necessarily bad in run blocking, but I just would not trust him to consistently dig out a defensive end in a 6 tech or a 5 tech. Like, I think he's going to get beat up. I think he did get beat up by bigger, stronger defensive ends. Pad level and leverage was one concern for me in the run game. So if you can get that down for Loveland, I think that he's able to maybe be a little bit more effective there. But no, you're drafting this guy to put him out on air. You're drafting this guy to be the number 1 receiving option at the tight end spot, create mismatches, whether it's in man coverage or zone coverage, because of what he can do. If there's safeties on him, he can run past them and be bigger than them and go up and get it. If there's linebackers on him, they're not going to be able to stay with him because of how good he is with his routes, with his footwork, getting in and out of breaks. He can burst out of there, and he has really good body control. So this is the guy that you're taking. And who was it? What NFL draft analyst has him as like a top 10 guy in
Daniel Jeremiah.
I don't know if I see that. I'm not going to argue there, because I definitely think he has the talent, but he's not well-rounded, in my opinion, to be a top 10 prospect. That's why I don't have him in my top 15. But he is nasty with his routes. He's super athletic. He's got the length. He's got the size. So that one's a little bit tough for me. I don't think he's a well-rounded player, which is not knocking him, because he's so great at receiving. But I don't think you can take someone that has that concern in his game as a top 10 player.
I will say, I think he hits a different gear as a blocker on the goal line, which was really encouraging for me. I think once Michigan got down to the goal line, and I think this is especially evident on the 2023 tape, and maybe it's got something to do with the fact that Michigan was chasing a national championship that year. But I think on the goal line, he's a little bit nastier, a little bit, just pushing guys off the line of scrimmage, just using his functional strength, not trying to overdo it with technique. So I think part of the blocking can be coached into him, but like you mentioned, you're not drafting him to block. He is an incredible receiver, and that's what you're going to get out of him. And I'm comfortable saying that he will succeed in the NFL.
For sure. I mean, and I was trying to think of, if you put him on the Broncos now, they just got Evan Ingram, so that doesn't look like a destination. But like, if you're looking at scheme wise, fit wise, that before they got Evan Ingram was like
that
what
was
made
perfect.
sense. Yeah,
because they got Lucas Kroll, Nate Atkins,
yeah.
all those blocking type, Adam Troutman, all those guys that know how to block.
And I think we've talked about this with the Colts. Like, who are the Colts tight ends right now?
It's Jelani Woods. I think they signed. I don't know if they have Woods anymore. They signed somebody but nobody.
So they have Drew Ogletree, Will
significant.
Mallory, Albert O.
Okwabunum.
So
yeah,
I mean, and that's the thing is, I think I brought
less
this up.
of
Is
a
like,
fit.
does Colson Loveland really fit what the Colts want to do with their offense with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor?
They want to run the ball. I think Tyler Warren is a better fit for the Colts.
Yes. And so it's like, it's going to be a little bit of a scheme fit, not much because of how elite he is. I think that any offense can find a way to use him. It's not the Harold Fannin conversation like, hey, you have to do certain things with him. Colson Loveland can do any route that you want him to do. He's going to be very effective at it. It's just, I don't think you can draft him in like the Colt system and say, hey, we want you to align in line for these 20 plays, and then we'll put you out wide and let Anthony Richardson over. The Saints, OC Kellen Moore. I could see it. Who are their tight ends?
They brought back Juwan Johnson, I think.
Yep, they did just re-sign Juwan Johnson. So they have Juwan Johnson. Oh, Taysom Hill, Foster Moreau.
Can't compete with Taysom Hill.
Taysom Hill's already there. But no, I mean, I could see that. With
if Warren goes like 5 to Jacksonville, I think is the highest he goes because they lost Ingram. It would be a little bit outlandish, but I think that's possible. And then the Jets at 7 kind of opens the door for Warren at 9 to the Saints. Maybe they trade back, but I think that's I like the fact that you bring up, and we're not going to be afraid to bring up, like, yes, he's a great prospect, but because of the position he plays and the way he plays the position, there are some fits that are better than others versus a guy like Tyler Warren, who I think has, can fit all 32 teams.
Could he fit in Miami's offense or
Tyler Warren?
No. Loveland? Sorry, Loveland.
Yeah, he's fast.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is like there,
but they have Jonnu Smith.
Yeah,
so
they do have Jonnu Smith. Yeah, and you're not blocking with Jonnu Smith much either. So
no, you're blocking with Julian Hill, who they have.
The Chargers. Does he go back with Harbaugh?
Ooh, that's not a bad one. If he falls, I think they go with him.
They would look at it. So, okay, well, let's jump into our
going to fall to the Chargers.
That's for sure.
Yeah, so Tyler Warren, the breakout star, one of the breakout stars of the this past college football season, the 2024 college football season. He's right around that 6'6", 260 mark. So you're like, oh, all right, bigger tight end. He must be slow and a blocker. False on one part. He's not slow. He is a good blocker, though. He's a do-it-all tight end. He had a huge jump in production this year, but I don't think that's like some sort of negative. Sometimes the one-year breakouts are negative, but I think Tyler Warren finally put it all together in his game. I think he was finding himself prior to this year and broke out. He's a physical route runner. He's really good at finding space, coming down with contested catches. It's one thing to go up and make a play on the ball, but he brings them in, and that's a huge portion of the tight end position. He provides some juice after the catch. He's a heavy-handed blocker. Still think he has some improvements to make in the blocking aspect, but he's a heavy-handed blocker with the strong lower half. He will be able to be coached into a very good blocker. He's not like the freak athlete that we saw out of Brock Bowers. He's an athlete in a different way. So he's not, some speed burner like, we referred to Elijah Arroyo a little bit as a burner. He's not that guy. But he can produce from a ton of different alignments, and he provides instant improvements to a team's run and pass game. So the reason me also a little bit more when we do mocks talk about that fit with the Jets is because the Jets, especially after signing Justin Fields, were so bad as a running and receiving team last year. So I think Tyler Warren's such a good fit for a team that's looking for a kill two birds with one stone upgrade in two aspects of their offense.
The play that I wrote down that defines, in my opinion, what Tyler Warren is.
I know what play it's going to be.
What's it going to? I want to see if you can guess.
The one where he snaps the ball against USC and then runs down the field and mosses somebody.
Yes. He snaps the ball in like a out Anaheim swinging gate, whatever you guys call it. I know it as Anaheim, where like it's a field goal unit that comes out and they give a funky formation, all the guys to one side or weird. He snaps the ball. The quarterback throws it backwards to the guy on the sidelines. Tyler Warren then releases as an eligible and mosses a receiver for a touchdown. It absolutely defines Tyler Warren, in my opinion. Big, strong, physical, like you mentioned, position versatile. This dude lined up as a wildcat quarterback. He played quarterback in high school. He was
can toss it a little bit.
He can sling it. He's a lefty, right?
I think so. I think I
if I remember
down somewhere.
Yeah, if I remember seeing him throw just out of memory, I'm pretty sure he's a lefty. But no, I mean, he had 1,200 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. That was like 500 more than anyone on Penn State. This dude was the offense. Like, you talk about the offense at Penn State, which has statistically not been great for a couple of years. It was Tyler Warren this year in the passing attack. He uses everything, goal line, wildcat quarterback. He can block great. He gave you 693 yards after the catch, so he can run after the ball. Big, physical, hard runner. He can make you miss. He can run through you. He is great in the run blocking game. I really like how they used him in counter. I think he's great at pulling and identifying the backer or whoever it is, being physical, getting his hands on him. Tough as nails when he has the ball in his hands. He's not going down easily. I do think he's a little bit of a stiffer of an athlete, but again, he's 6'5.5". Like, you don't expect him to be fluid. That's what makes Colston Loveland, in my opinion, so good, is because he is a little bit taller, but he is a little bit more narrow, but he's not stiff. Tyler Warren is a bigger, stiffer guy, but that's not a knock on him because he still can run routes, he's creative when he's running routes. He gets open, things like that. So he is a complete prospect. That's why, in my opinion, I do have him as a top 10 guy, because I see him coming in and, hey, it don't matter what you're doing. Like you mentioned with the Colts, like, yeah, you're going to be able to run block with this guy consistently. Heck, maybe you put him and Anthony Richardson in the backfield and run some read option, and they both have options to throw it once they get it.
Maybe they have a quarterback battle in training camp.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, so he's a complete guy. He can do it in the run. He can do it in the pass. Very athletic for his size, big frame. I do like Tyler Warren. I mean, we'll talk about this a lot. He's obviously, where would you put him, prospect ranking wise coming out of college, like compared with guys we've seen the last couple of years? Brock Bowers, obviously he's not Brock Bowers.
He's under
Kyle
Bowers.
Pitts.
Under Pitts. I mean,
really Pitts was a freak coming out.
I don't care what he did in the end. I think some people have a real hard time separating prospects and players in the NFL. I don't care what Pitts did in the NFL at all. He was such a good prospect. That's never getting taken away from him. So yeah, under Kyle Pitts, under Brock Bowers, but there's nobody else that I can really think of
that would have been above him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There could be somebody.
Laporta? Where would you put him?
Oh, I would have put Tyler Warren over Laporta. I wasn't the biggest Laporta fan.
Okay.
Until he got drafted in the second round, and I was like, all right, he's gonna be good.
Yeah.
I think he is more so as a prospect and potentially as a career arc in the NFL, like TJ Hawkinson's level. And that's not just because they both have flowy hair. But they just, the way where they can be really good receiving options, and then they can turn on that badass switch as a blocker, and they're like, hey, you remember how I mossed you 2 plays ago? Now I'm going to feed you grass.
Yeah.
So I think, maybe we're talking a little bit less intently about the ins and outs of Tyler Warren's game than we did Colston Loveland. But I think that's because there's a little bit more critique in the Colston Loveland evaluation. Not to say that I don't think both are really good players, but there's not an area of Tyler Warren's game that we can talk about like we can talk about Colston Loveland's blocking.
Yeah.
So really complete prospect, and he's carrying the weight for this tight end class. Because I think if it was just Colston Loveland, there would be a lot less conversation about this tight end class. If it wasn't for Tyler Warren, we might have done a pass catcher ranking for our last episode.
And it would have just been Colston Loveland probably in there.
Exactly. I did a post last year for all my positional previews, and last year, because of the tight end class, I had pass catchers because I do my top 10s, and so I did my top 9 receivers, and I snuck Brock Bowers in. But Tyler Warren's the reason we get to talk so much about these other guys, which they're worth talking about. There's nothing to take away from the Gunnar Helms, the Mitchell Evanses, the Arroyos, of course, that are going to bring value on day 2, day 3. But Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, those are the day 1 guys. If your team needs a tight end, that's the direction you want to go in. You've any thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I just think tight ends are the one position. Well, not the one, but it's one of the few that's like, oh man, he's not a great pass catcher, but they can still be a very good NFL player because of how they can impact the game run blocking. That's a guy,
Yeah.
in my opinion, Mitchell Evans, right? And you talk about Gunnar Helm, who is not a complete prospect right now, but I see it on film. And so it's like some of these guys, younger prospects, tight ends might not be used as much in college as they are in the NFL. So maybe they come in here. There's a scout or a GM and a head coach that have a vision for this guy, and they see it and they put him in that system and they utilize him. Travis Kelce, right? Like he's been utilized great. Sam Laporta, like you said, you weren't a big fan of him, but they put him in that Lions system. They've used him in a great way. So a lot of it's fit dependent. Pass catchers, just like you have to have an idea of how you're going to use these guys, Harold Fannin. But there is a little bit more ways to impact it. Like if you're a great run blocker as a receiver, okay, yeah, you might see the field in certain situations, but you're not going to be a top 3 receiver on your team. You're going to probably be down the line because you can't run routes. But here, if you can provide some blocking, like a Mitchell Evans, who we talked about, or, what is it? Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech, or some of those guys, like those guys will have the ability to make an NFL roster, even though they're not in our top 8s. They'll have the ability to make an NFL roster because of the impact they can have, and 12 personnel, goal line, stuff like that. So it's an interesting position to break down because it is a little bit weaker compared to some of the other classes, but the top end talent is still there.
I'm glad we see it pretty eye to eye, because I think it's important not to get carried away with receiving ability as tight ends, because we talked about Aronde Gadsden a little bit and some other guys like him. There might be some people that evaluate players that'll be really high on Fannin, and even higher than you are on Arroyo, because you have him at tight end 3, but you still say there's a gap between 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah,
some people don't have as big of a gap. Sound like an Aflac commercial. Help close that gap. But some people get carried away with the receiving ability. Step 1 for being a tight end is blocking. You got to do your role. They have every team's got 3 receivers to do that part already. So, you got to be able to hold your own as a blocker. Everything you do as a receiver is a bonus. And then you got guys like Colson Loveland, who are a little bit of an anomaly at the the tight end position because of what they can do as a receiver. Yep. So we will probably have a mock coming up soon. And then we'll probably hit an O-line preview before we flip sides of the ball to go to defense later on. So stay tuned for that. And of course, if you guys aren't subscribed, make sure you guys subscribe, and then make sure, especially if you're a Patriots fan, if you've been listening and don't follow Jace on Instagram at Pat's Drive, make sure you do that. You can follow me on Instagram at The Draft Geek for a ton of, overall draft content. But until next time, for Jace Campbell, I'm Max Shostak. Thank you guys so much for listening. Peace out.